Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Hercules and the Space Gods, I'm proud to bring you the URANTIA book with the one, the only, the legendary Nick Curto. Greetings, Nick. How are you?
Oh, Hercules, you did that exactly like I wrote it. Beautifully done.
Very well. I'll be here in case you need me, and I look forward to your show.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And hello, everybody. My name is Nick Curto, and I'm a longtime reader of the URANTIA book. I found that over 35 years ago, or it found me in a Unitarian church. After going there for 2 years, particular Sunday morning, very sunny, nice, and the preacher for the last few minutes said, and I'd like to finish this service by reading from the Urantia book. And I thought maybe that's Eastern Indian because they read a lot of different books, but I never heard of anything like that. And so he read 3 or 4 paragraphs. And I want to tell you something. I felt like I was hit by a spiritual truck. What in the world was that? It was different than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And everybody then filed out of this beautiful church and on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And I literally stayed there alone for about 10, 15 more minutes because I needed to digest literally what I just heard. It was a wonderful surprise. So anyhow, that's how I found the book, or it found me. And I'm going to ask that first question to my wonderful guest, a longtime friend, a dear, dear man, and David Glass. Welcome, welcome to my podcast Zoom.
Thank you so much, Nick. Nick and I are both currently members of the Urantia Society of Greater New York. That's still where my membership is, although I'm a member at large, living in North Carolina now, and it has members in many places. But um, yeah, this is about. I graduated from college in '71. Um, Having read literature, and it was sequential. So the end of that was contemporary literature. And 20th century literature is atheistic, existential, valueless. Um, the chief figures there, if you leave, I mean, there is Faulkner, there is Hemingway, there is um, the series with the Great Gatsby and all those wonderful things that those won Nobel Prizes, but also um, um, books like The Stranger and then there are Camus and even Samuel Beckett, all winning the author of Waiting for Godot, winning the Nobel Prize and not even going to get it because they didn't value anything. Now, um, and so I've treasured literature, but I like so that was the culmination of my education. That was 1971. So I had about a year. Actually, I had kind of started looking at and chipping away at the faith I grew up with as a junior, and that was pretty well decimated by graduation time. Um, and So I launched off into almost nothing, and I was hoping some light would come on somewhere. Of course, it was only about a year, because about the summer of '72, well, the February of '72, I told the universe, let's get to the bottom of things, huh? I mean, there's this disconcerting realization when you graduate from your undergraduate class that you don't know what you thought you might know after 4 years. You basically have found out, if you're lucky, the vastness of what you don't know. And of course, there are three kinds of knowledge: what you know and what you don't know, and then what you don't know that you don't know.
That's
And
true.
that is, really limit. I mean, it's infinite. And um, so Those events from February to July of that year, each one I wanted to remember in retrospect that each step was entirely seemingly haphazard. And I thought, this might work out, but don't count on it. And let's go and see if you get to the end of that. And so now what? And this involved, so anyway, I went from Florida to, wound up going to Colorado, where I heard the word, the Urantia book, but nothing about it. Not how to spell it, not what it's about. I just heard the word in a conversation of other people. And the group I was with went on to California. This was when everybody was California dreaming. And I went into the largest metaphysical bookstore I have ever seen. It's in San Francisco. I think someone told me it's still there. Maybe it's not the same one. As you know, this is decades. That's why I saw it on the top shelf. But I thought, maybe that's how you spell it. The hardback was $20 then. I don't know what edition that was. I couldn't reach that. It's one the bookseller had to get on a ladder, and go up and get it. And so it didn't fall on my head like it had some people. But I needed to wait with my friends to see a movie. It was Fontaine and Nureyev doing Romeo and Juliet. And we had to wait through a whole movie to see it because it was so popular. So I was looking through this 2,100-page tome, which we barely carry. I had about $30 to my name there. So this was 2/3 of it. But I was looking at everything. I never looked at anything that big, but I had loved big literary books. Anyway, that's the founder. So but the part I started with was I always thought I always read from beginning to end every book. And the language in the foreword it struck me that this is an intelligence. I've never encountered this level of intelligence. And it doesn't give much. There is an address, 533 Chicago. In Chicago, so I thought, well, I know where Chicago is. I thought, let me read through this and then I'll go see who these people are. Anyway, that's how I started. So from Gainesville, Florida, there was little links, and like when I got to Colorado, I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't know who I would go with. And then I had to hitchhike all the way back with about $2 from San Francisco to San Diego and across to Atlanta, then back down south. You can't do that today. It's against the law, for one thing. Not that everybody was obeying the law in the early 70s, but anyway. So that's it.
Wow. Well, I've asked that question. I think it's a good question to ask at the beginning of an interview. And I've gotten some pretty amazing answers. One person said that they were in a Barnes and Noble, and they happened to be drifting into the spiritual section. And as they were there, this book fell off the shelf onto the floor. And he picked it up, and guess what? Guess what book that was? He said, there was no way, there was no wind, there was nothing to do that except it happened. And that was how he found, or how the book found him. Um, I've had some incredible answers. One person said that they got it as a gift, and they put it on their coffee table, and it stayed there for a couple of years. And then they looked and said, I've never really opened that book. And they did, and they were very surprised what was in it. And then from that point on, they opened the book quite a bit. It's just an interesting set of answers that I do get from that kind of question. Um, David, if I may ask, what passages in the book moved you the most?
Well, I shared a couple of paragraphs, I think, with you. Um, this has been a long time coming, this podcast. I think you have asked me, and there's been activities when you had an opening and so forth. So I had posted a couple of quotes about quotes from both of them really are from the next to the last paper.
Okay.
And I suppose there are listeners who are not familiar with the book, but you just didn't say a book that long. But it has a general structure of looking at the big universe, and it narrows it down. In this section, then it gets into the history of our planet, which is very long, which begins really with the beginning of our galaxy. And it's a long time ago in not a far away galaxy, but this one, much longer than 13 billion years. And so the scope of it, then it follows right on down to life and teaching of Jesus. And then this paper is the whole history from 2000 to now called After Pentecost. Pentecost is 40 days after the resurrection. This year will be May 24th. So that's a lot of history. And, when you've looked at that much, now you've seen these, well, not to go in that, but it has a great deal to do in this paper with history that bears on our times. And it has fairly non-specific, but not dates and stuff, but a general prophetic view of where we are and where we could go, and the potentials for the future. And in fact, the last section of this paper is divided into subsections called sections, and it's titled "The Future." But so those are what I was looking at. Generally, it's the life and teachings of Jesus, which is part 4. And from paper 2 on, it points to that. In paper 2, starting with God and then the universe. So in paper 2, the beginning of that, the nature of God, the beginning is just God as the universal Father and very few things. In the paper 1, really kind of key things, that he's personal, it's just affirmed there. And we're just working with that, till we have some other cultural change or linguistic change or whatever. And but paper 2 is the nature of God. In the opening section, but it isn't even a section, it's a pre-section, it's sort of a preamble. So that we really can't tell you much more than was revealed to you in the earth life of Jesus, the incarnated Son of this God. That will be that is the fullest revelation to humans that you have the capacity to appreciate, or any mortal on any world. Now, just the news that there are other inhabited worlds, about the time that cosmos are coming out and looking out into this, that was the big question. It still is. Although, now we have thousands of potential inhabited planets in the so-called Goldilocks zone. And they're increasing daily because there are places all over the planet researching that. And there are new ways to do that. There's mainly 2 ways. We won't go into that. But on this planet, this incarnation here, with that is the life and teachings. So there's the life and the teachings. And this is why is it here? That's a question. So just pondering that. And why is it a huge, over 700 pages of this, a third of the book, right, Darby? So this is undertaken in study group. There are study groups that do nothing but go over and over and over part 4. And even part 4 has been published by itself. I was not personally in favor of that, but it's been done. There's been, lots of things done with this book. And so anyway, in other words, there's been a lot of focus on Hartford. It's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
But the real editor, the highest ranking author, the one thing that is unique about the book and why you can't really use it too easily in an academic paper is that the authors are superhuman. They're celestial beings. And you can't really say, well, they went to this university and here's you can't give their credits in the footnotes or in the back in the notes and stuff because you can't go, document that there are no peer reviews of it or anything. And a few people have put it in their books anyway, but some of the revealers, the authors, start at the very highest level because they're looking at the whole universe and they've actually been in the presence of God. And they say, they testify that they are the highest authority on the nature of God that can be made available to man, to humans at this level, intelligent, upright bipeds. And so, but what does this the author say? It points to the end and says, we really can't do more for you. If you start with this, if you start with the life and the teaching, the life demonstrates the teaching, because there's no book. The person called Joshua ben Joseph, Jesus of Nazareth, did not write anything. And anything he did write, he went back and destroyed it. And after that, he just wrote in the sand, things like that. So there's no authored, or like with the Quran, it's not really written by Muhammad, but it came through him. A voice came to him and said, recite, write this, or just recite. It was written down somehow. And so the great scriptures have come through in various ways. But the so-called, we know in the New Testament, the records there of the four Gospels, the three synoptic Gospels, and then the John, were written decades after the life of Jesus, but by memory. And many, like Luke never met Jesus and had to compile his record from interviewing people and that kind of thing. So there's no contemporary Greek or Roman records. The search for the historic Jesus, which Schweitzer was one of the early pioneers in that. And there are people that can tell you a lot more about that than I can. I have looked into that. That was what I was starting to look into as a junior in college, and discovering that there is a Babylonian Genesis, and these other religions had saviors that had apostles and had miraculous lives and died and were killed and came early. They died somehow and they resurrected and ascended, and many of them had virgin births, and one of them was born on December 25th. So all this shook up what was left of my faith, which you can't bring that under question anyway. That's one of the things that happen when you go to school. And so that's the vacuum I had after that. And of course, you don't come to this if you're going to read it from beginning to end. You read through lots of very challenging stuff before you get here. But here in this end, if you don't like Harry Met Sally, Harry is so pessimistic. He reads the ends of books in case he dies on the way through reading it. I wasn't that pessimist. And I would look at the end of the URANTIA book in case I died in the process of reading the 2,100 pages. And if you remember that from the movie. But at the beginning of the book, it says that's what's going to happen. You look and that's where it is. It's at the end. And it's the life and the teachings. So and Jesus tells the apostles, remember the life I have lived among you. And when there are stories in there nobody knows about. He toured the Mediterranean for 2 years. All there's speculations. What did he do? There's missing times in the New Testament records when he was growing up. What was he doing? That was what he was doing. So this stature, this claim that the book is a revelation is going to give us information about Jesus' life and his teachings in a more, when there's not 700 pages otherwise available to us, that arrested my attention. Then focusing more, maybe just go on with this, is focusing more on this last paper. We read things that aren't happening in our lifetime. Now, they weren't happening in my lifetime when I started reading this in the early 70s. Since then, of course, the search for the historic Jesus had begun and all that. Of course, people had reached doubt had arisen. I'm not the first person to doubt, but that's just biographical, but this look at here, I was questioning, and I read things like, do not, this is on page 2082 out of 2097, I believe it is. You can tell how late it is. Do not overlook the value of your spiritual heritage, the river of truth running down through the centuries, even to the barren times of a materialistic and secular age. In all your worthy efforts to rid yourselves of the superstitious creeds of past ages, make sure that you hold fast the eternal truth. Be patient. When the present superstition revolt is over, the truth of Jesus' gospel will persist gloriously to illuminate a new and better way. So, there are many of us that are going to be patient, our full lifetime. But this is this is what I mean by a prophetic statement that doesn't have any calendar to it, about the future. And I've read this many times, the whole book, but each reading it kind of sinks in. There's a quote I finally found. It's not where I thought it was, which often turns out to be the case. It's in the paper called The Paradise Sons of God. Now, not the Creator Sons, which is about Jesus in his origin, but the other two, the Avenals and the I'm to the choir here, who would know what an Avenal and a Danal are the Trinity teachers' sons. They're the two other main kinds of sons of God, as descending sons, as far as evolutionary creatures like us are involved, starting at the mortal level, because there's a vast population of the cosmos have nothing to do with what the Ranch book is about. This is mainly for us. A lot of it is tailored for our planet. And out of there's a staggering number of inhabited planets right now, over 5 trillion. So when you go from, is there one other, are we the only inhabited planet, to this claim like that? It's staggering. And when you first hit that, you see that the speculation, people are wondering, at this time, cosmos was becoming a worldwide sensation. Carl Sagan is on this spaceship of the imagination. Of course, Star Trek's going on. The imagination of leaving Earth and exploring the universe in person. And or in the spaceship of the imagination, So a lot of it's speculative, but they're not. I mean, it's fictional because you go to these other planets in Star Wars. They all speak English. They don't, they have cultures similar enough to us to be able to relate to um, Captain Kirk and everybody else, as though they're talking to Joe next door. So that is kind of a stretch, but um, it gets people thinking. We're looking here at this. Let's kind of focus on now. Um, Christianity stands in need, the next paragraph, Christianity stands in need of new contact with the uncompromised teachings of Jesus. Now, the only thing we have is the New Testament, which is very short, spotty, and the Gospels have different emphases. It's already been discovered that there were probably, if they were authored by their author, they weren't written by them because this is common practice. You get a scribe or somebody to write things for you, and but uh, why is this important? Well, let's go back. If the thing puts together one big picture, it's one question. It turns out to be a big answer because it's a big book. I found it I found in paper 4, so we're almost back at the beginning again. They're talking about, and they're still elaborating further, starting with the revelation of Jesus' life and teachings. We can tell you a little more that may further fill out the nature of the personality of God, his relationship to the universe, to the individual, and so forth, in the first 5 chapters or papers. And in the end of paper 4, they're all looking at new or confirmed information and beliefs and thought have occurred to humans already. It's part of their mandate to do that whenever possible. But you get to the end of paper 4, and they rarely do this. Well, one of the functions of revelation is the elimination of error through the elimination of confusion through the authoritative. I should quote that directly. But the idea is to correct erroneous beliefs that are key beliefs. They generally give you positive new information, or they amplify what we already know. But they rarely, Jesus taught the apostles, don't take things away, but give them the new leaven, our new spiritual nourishment that will crowd out the error. That will just grow like a mustard seed in their mind. That was his teaching. Don't take things out of people. But they do point to these because they see there's such key ideas that reflect on the nature of God, which is what they're talking about here at the beginning. There we read, the people of Urantia, your planet, continue to suffer from the influence of primitive concepts of God. The gods that go on a rampage in the storm, that shake the earth in their wrath and strike down men in their anger. Well, you read about God like that at the beginning of the Old Testament, who inflict judgments of displeasure in times of famine and flood. These are the gods of primitive religion. They are not the gods who live and rule the universes. Now, just seeing GODS gives you a little, is this a polytheistic text? We learned later that there's one deity, but 3 personalizations. That's where that's coming from. Such concepts are a relic of the times when men supposed that the universe was under the guidance and domination of the whims of such imaginary gods. But I say when you look at the religion of primitive man or the primitive religion of man, or anywhere in between, always bear in mind that you need to come from the level of consciousness that they had to work with, and the level of mind and the mores, the morale level. When you can't take contemporary values and scientific knowledge and so forth and try to apply it and say, well, you know, it did take longer than 6 days for the Earth to be, or the universe to be created. So that can't be true. Just throw the whole thing out. Because we're not holding to the eternal truths. It's got to be mixed up in there. But what are they? And this helps to discern them. But this going on from there, mortal man is beginning to realize that he lives in a realm of comparative law and order as far as concerns the administrative policies and conduct of supreme creators and supreme controllers. Well, why would they think that? Well, there's a movie that just premiered Friday, which is yesterday. It's not really, it's sort of a documentary. It's sort of a compilation of converging scientific research. It's called The Story of Everything, and people says, no, that's not Michelle's book, which is a 200-page story of the URANTIA book. I don't know what you call it, not a reduction. It's nothing, you can't reduce it, but retelling, whatever. I don't know what she would say. I don't want to speak for but it's a compilation of entirely scientific findings, mainly about the macrocosm and the microcosm, the very large and very small. We know relativity relates to the very large and quantum to the tiny, and indeed the tiny, tiny. But the science, I saw it. It was sold out. Every showing is showing out because it's only going to run a short time. Maybe here it'll show 5 days. Now other places may be longer. This is quite a large municipal area here. And you could have heard a pin drop. It's less than 2 hours. The parts about biology and the DNA and the RNA and the mechanisms of cellular reproduction. And less than about 100 years ago, thinking that the cell was a membrane around basically plasmic goo, undifferentiated goo. The discovery I read this in 8th grade, the mitochondria, the energy source. We discovered, it just goes, once people got interested in this, they focused on it. It was in our lifetime, our years of my lifetime, that Crick and Watson saw the DNA code and this enormous molecule there is very, very simple. It only has 4 combinations of amino acids that determine all the traits of any individual. And let me go further. We find that RNA kind of stimulates that disassembly and reassembly. I really don't know. I've met a person who's done postdoc in crystallology. Now, she's not a gazer at crystal balls. She is studying, and there's a great deal of crystals in the DNA molecule. There's a word for movie technology, graphics. The graphics of all of this, of course, they can't really show you with the electron microscope what they're seeing. They don't really see that level, but they're not visually seeing. There's all mechanisms going on. So So taking things apart, building proteins. I mean, it goes down to this quantum almost level of biological research, and we're seeing how quantum physics has developed a basic uh, chemistry at that level, growing up into biology. But this is not just emergence of things that's out of nothing to higher and higher levels, because it doesn't explain anything. You don't ever, then we just think, well, things would get very complex and they just pop up. Chemistry gets very complex and then life just pops up. Well, this really doesn't tell us anything. And because you haven't found that threshold. But it's based on one book that is written by the main person that's involved in this, the host of the documentary, Stephen Meyer. And his book is called The Return of the God Hypothesis. Now, for those of us who've had faith all along, God was never a hypothesis. It was an experience. In personal religious experience, God is an experience. You can experience certainty, but you can't demonstrate that scientifically. In fact, you can't demonstrate it whatsoever. Your personal experience, which is also affirmed in the book. And so I feel all this resonance of a personal experience, because I had a lot of experience in the last 54 years since 72, matched with, multiple readings, and then virtually constant contact with other readers and stuff. So, reading on here, when we're beginning to sense this, what we're seeing is the scientific evidence. We don't really have much more direct knowledge of the administrative policies and conduct of the supreme creators and supreme controllers of the universe. That would truly be hypothetical on our part at this point. But we see, like evidence, that we see the shadow of it. We see this incredible design. The Goldilocks universe, not just our planet happens to be just so far from the sun and all this stuff to make life possible here. The fine tuning, well, many people know this, of the so-called Big Bang, the hypothetical, that is a hypothesis for you, it's still a theory, had to be, you have to go to 0.45 zeros, put a 1, and that's a hypothesis. Then it goes beyond what we can even speculate about. You think, well, why can't you just speculate forever? Well, there's a mathematical, time to can't. I can't. The thing is, this launches you into everything.
Mhm.
There's a famous mathematician who has shown that there's a degree of when of um, let's see, like a reading, you could get a measurement. This whole science is measurements, quantification, and there's a limit to that that's inherent in mathematics somehow, and like we can get that. We know that if you go down into the quarks and then from so forth, I mean, just get waves of energy in an ocean of energy. If you really want a pretty popular approach to this, or you can read Deepak Chopra, who's very good at it, because he's a scientist and a doctor and a popular book writer. He's written almost 100 books. Um, anyway, this is not the main thing. The resonance of the teachings of life. Going on from this, so we're going to end when in 20 minutes.
Um, my producer will give us a high sign. when we're,
Okay.
I think, 5 minutes before. So we're in pretty good shape right now.
Wow. Well, it's like,
Near
yeah.
the end of it, I'm going to ask you if you have any particular final words, but that's coming up in a little bit. Because there's going to be a lot of people looking at this that have never seen or heard of the Rancher book before.
Right.
And I always, of course, encourage them that they could go to one of the most wonderful websites is urantiabook.org. It's
Mhm.
beautifully done. In fact, they've done a lot of amazing things to it in the last couple of months. It's never been better. And as you know, David, they have the entire book. You can read it chapter by chapter. They have the entire book now recorded so that
Uh,
people can hear it. And I've heard people
mhm.
tell me that they play it in their car. They have
Yeah.
recordings and they just play it. And that's
Mhm.
especially on long trips. And it really helps
Right.
quite a bit. And they learn so much that way. And of course, as you also
Mhm.
know, what is it now? 28 world languages? That's
That's right.
incredible for a 2,000
And
page book.
more all the time.
Wonderful. So our friends and neighbors all over our planet can now partake in this book. That is
Mhm.
an incredible achievement, and hats off to everyone who's done that,
Right.
had a part in that particular amazing adventure to get it right. 2,000
Mhm.
pages in 28 world language, and I believe there's two or three more that they're working on right now, new versions.
Yes, yeah, it's working all the time, and um, many of them won't be published because it's too expensive. And once you can get it in the language, and just go right to audio or go right to as something you can get on a Kindle or something or on your screen. And
Mhm.
you don't have to wait for the money to produce a hard copy. That's been a big hold up. But good. Let me stop and come back in. Flying into this overflying. All my experience is not unique. We know that there's a certain demographic that is disenchanted with organized religion, especially the youth, and they're looking around. More so than even my generation. I think that this is because this is it's been reported to me, and I also experienced it directly. But we know that, for example, um, with the Christianity, we have things like Phyllis Tickle coming along, the publisher. She was head of the religion section of Publishers Weekly. She wrote a book called the Great Emergence, and said that about every 500 years, Christianity undergoes a rummage sale, throws out what it doesn't need, and keeps going. Like there's 500, zero, the Jesus, and then 500, the Gregorian, and we move to monasticism, which gets us through into the middle of the Dark Ages. Not really too much, but that's when we have Oxford and the Sorbonne and these universities popping up. A little after that, it's the proto-Renaissance, 12th century. And then, of course, the Renaissance at and the Reformation. See, it's about time, the 20th century, for such a thing. So we have that in her expectation. Then they took this term, this emergence we see a lot. When we see emergent Christianity, maybe we see emergent, these are kind of modernizations, throwing out things you just can't, and you can't hold on to anymore. Like if you can't, like you're fine with Christianity, but it troubles you that a beneficent God would have a hell, and it is just the vision, eternal. What could you do in a finite amount of time, evil enough, or even erroneous enough, or ignorant enough to have that as a result? Or other things. Um, we are coming up on the 250th, anniversary of our nation, which, in the words of Thomas Paine, one of the chief pamphleteers of the Revolution, we have the chance to reinvent the world, to make the world anew, and to see what a huge break it was, because the rule of a dominant individual or small group is almost coincident with our historical records of civilization anyway. You can go, I mean, it's from Egypt and go. I was out of school when I discovered Sumer. I went to a bookstore and there was a book there called History Begins at Sumer. I said, what the heck is Sumer? Nobody mentioned it to me. I was a lit major, and I don't even history. I mean, so, and that was the same thing. So now, I mean, what a break to the rule by the governed, by the consent of the governed. So that revolution did spread. I mean, that was first. Then we see that this is the rights of man, not the rights of Americans. This is the rights of humanity. All of humans are spiritually equal. That's affirmed in the Urantia book, and they all want to be free. But I mean, we see this fervent now, and we see figures like actually, stemming before that, reaching to a transcendental level for this, which is what we get to at the end of the story of everything. The scientific community says, well, we can't say this anything happening like that. It had to have happened at a supernatural level, at a level beyond the nature that we can investigate. It's just the probabilities point to that virtually conclusively, as far as statistics could go. And of course, that interpretation is a philosophic one. It's not a scientific one. You pop up from materialism to give that judgment. That's in this paper, in 195. And then, of course, spirituality is transcendent to that. When we're talking about transcendence, we've got transcendentalism, Emerson and Thoreau. Thoreau's book on civil disobedience inspired Gandhi, Martin Luther King, the whole group in the 20th century doing likewise, liberating groups in India. Again, it was getting the monarchy, the same, what was left of the Great British Empire there, out of there, and Indian independence. That doesn't mean it is stayed, but that this going on like this in our, in our time, in our awareness. You can read the autobiography of Gandhi or Martin Luther King, and we know to Archbishop Desmond Tutu saying, without forgiveness, why can't you just forgive these age-old feuds? Well, you have to grow out of them. You can't. They say evolution is slow but unerringly effective, and so this the kingdom of heaven is seeing that it's really transcendent. We get up to the spiritual level. So those are the things that really seem to be very key right now. We have had a renaissance of learning, but we need a spiritual renaissance to see that. Thank you. Yeah, that this is a good wrap up. I've kind of started that. Jesus always said, well, my kingdom is not of this world. Well, does that mean it's all the afterlife? No, it's a level of spiritual awareness that you can become initiated into. And to come into that is like a birth into a new consciousness of spiritual awareness. And we're looking
Absolutely
for a
true.
spiritual
Absolutely true.
renaissance next. But the apostles couldn't get that. But we're ready for it now. And this, one of the keys of revelation is to help that happen, to correct the errors, to show how they came about and how reasonable they were at the time, and calling out that this new step we need to take now cannot be instigated with the trumpet blasts of the Middle Ages. The many of the doctrines and dogmas, or even earlier than that, of the third century, and then from Augustine and Thomas and so forth, right on up, and then mainly, renewed in the 12th century with the academics. So the leading people now, like India Delio, who was taking Teilhard de Chardin into the future, and looking back, says we need to radically change Catholic doctrine. And of course, this is going on in Protestant too, with the emergent Christianity. People writing books like A New Kind of Christianity, that's Brian McLaren, or Buckminster Fuller saying, no more secondhand God. That's one of his smaller books. And that's the nature of the religion of Jesus, not the religion about Jesus. That
Big difference,
distinction
very big
is
difference there. Yeah.
so big. And this hasn't even really dawned on people that Christianity is a religion about Jesus. And they're not, you couldn't know, but we understand why they couldn't know. Because the phenomenon, the resurrection, that was such a great story to tell about this person that it would eclipse this thing that they didn't really understand. That there's the kingdom of heaven that's right here, right now. It's at hand.
Mhm.
Even John the Baptist was saying it's right here, but Jesus was pointing to it. That's my kingdom. And but he would have preferred to say family or something. That word kingdom brought them into conflict with the Romans, and that was his a really unfortunate term was pushed on Jesus by his
Yeah,
contemporaries. We don't know this. Just Paul Harvey used to talk about the rest of the story. Well, this is the rest of the story, and it's a long story because we have a lot of things to work on.
absolutely true. David,
Mhm.
this goes so fast. This hour has always
Yeah.
just flown. I knew it was going to. It certainly has. David, you're a delight. You really are. And I hope sometime in the near future we could do another part to this because there's so much more, as you well know, we want to
Yeah.
talk about here. Uh, I just want to insert that if anyone has a particular comment or a question, for David or myself, I'm going to give you my email address, and you're more than happy to email me, and I'll take a look at that, and I'll pass it on to David if there's anything like that. So let me go ahead with that. My personal email address is NICKNYNY1, and that's the numeral one, not ONE, but the numeral one at gmail.com. I'm going to repeat it. NICKNYNY1 at gmail.com. David, a total delight. Again, wonderful to see you and to speak to you, and look forward to more.
Wonderful. Are, are we through, or can I say goodbye with something? The chief characteristics of the kingdom of heaven are love, truth, beauty, goodness, forgiveness,
Mhm.
patience, long suffering. These fruits of the spirit that are easy to adopt and maintain from this transcendent level. And you can get there, and we need a spiritual renaissance um, to ameliorate this. But we just have to be patient. It will work out because it's self-correcting because it's part of evolution. But we have this document now to really help us see how we got where we are now. It says that revelation is necessary to help bring this about. It has a human component. They had to have revelatory help from above too.
I think it's no accident that we have it here now. I think we've never needed anything like this. Now's the time, and it just seems as though the timing is right on the money on this, what we're going through now worldwide. and when we have this kind of document that's so detailed. So again, David, much love to you always, and much love to everyone everywhere. This is Nick Curto for the URANTIA book, saying much love to all, and take a look at this incredible document, the URANTIA book. And good night.
Good night. Thank you both for a thoughtful and informative hour.
Thank you, Hercules. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. Good
Thank
night.
you.